Brought to you by Knights of Awakening. This is the Labyrinth. Today's episode is about Evocation, Conjuration, and some of the misconceptions that get into these methods, what they are, and how some of the communities have taken them to mean different things than they mean. And in some ways it's kind of a shout out to the spirit keeping community, in some ways it's not. It really is meant to clear up some of those greater misconceptions in it. So before I go any further, as always, I want to thank all of you for joining, with us here today. It really makes a difference to know that we've got people out there that care about the content and the topics, and it really warms my soul when people give us any kind of feedback on this. A like, a share, a subscribe, a comment, anything like that reminds us that we are doing something that has some value to you out there, and that really makes it wonderful. And the outpouring of responses I've gotten whenever I've asked any questions or asked for topic ideas has been amazing, and I want to thank all of you. So with that having been said, the first thing we're going to hit on is evocation. Evocation is the calling of a spirit or being. And the term spirit in this tends to be the common used term, because originally we didn't break spirits down into all these different subclasses, living or dead, or various other things. Traditional mysticism, you had spirits, which were generally either demons or they weren't, and you kind of treat them all the same. You treat angels, demons, and everything else as the same thing, a spirit. It was a non-corporeal entity, being without a body in this realm. And a lot of what we've gotten into over the years kind of expands on that, and a lot of it is modern. Ideas such as beings having a physical body in another realm, or existing in this way or that way, get debated all of the time, and that's not my place to debate this here and now. I'll eventually do a show on my thoughts on it, but I also recognize that we don't have really much proof on that. What we have proof on is what things are in the here and the now, the immediate, the bringing things forth into this realm and interacting with them from this realm, because we are tied to our bodies and we interact from here to there. So evocation is bringing them forth for a task, to achieve something. It is a goal-oriented concept. And evocation, generally, most people, you'll find their introduction to it is reminiscent somewhere from the Goetia and the Lesser Key of Solomon. The greater key focusing more on harnessing the planetary forces and the energies therein. The lesser key focuses on working with a particular type of demon. Also, you have a lot of people that work from an Enochian standpoint originally. These methods have evolved quite a bit, and the viewpoints on them have evolved quite a bit too. And we will cover that towards the end of this episode, what the different viewpoints are on evocation methods, and we'll hit on some of my thoughts on it. But with that, evocation is bringing something forth, ultimately, to achieve a task. That's what we've got to cement in that. And it's based on the power of authority, your authority to bring them into being, which may be raw force of psychic will, and it may be interrelated to self-esteem and self-focus. It may be related to a lot of different things. We know that ritual helps with it, because it sets us in a mind frame, and it sets us in a paradigm to help with the act of bringing them forth into action. Ritual is invaluable. Ritual isn't the only method, and I'm going to get into that towards the end of this episode as well. We've established what evocation is. So what's conjuration? Because, they tend to get split now. And the thing is, there was a time when evocation and conjuration were the exact same thing. There was a time when there was no difference. You were a conjurer. You evoked things. What? Yeah, you brought them out into the world. I should hit real quick then that invocation, while it is not expressly stated, I tend to use the terminology to create a differential because of some of the things that I've read, and it's not widespread to use this differentiating concept in the language. And what I mean by that is that for a lot of people, evocation is invocation, and invocation is evocation. But for some of us that have been around longer, a lot of the older texts and some of the newer texts hit on the idea that invoking is to bring something into the self. And it's very easy to think of it like that. Invoke is to bring in, evoke is to bring out. It's not hyper complex in that respect, but it is worth hitting on to separate that before we get into conjuration. Conjuration, again, it used to be that conjuration was evocation. You conjured a being to send it out to do something. Well, with the spirit keeping community having taken root, and with some of the advances in those directions, and some of the about a dozen different paradigms, and I say a dozen different paradigms because there are. You know, we have spirit keeping as Creepy Hollows does it, which I don't know the exact methodology of the conjuration done because they really don't share their secrets, and I'm not asking them to. But what we know is that they take one view on it, while other groups take other views on it, and then individual conjurers take views on how conjuration should and shouldn't be done. I'm not going to get into the right and wrong way to do that. I respect all my fellows that work in that field. I've got a lot of love and respect for everyone who's in this, even my detractors. I look at it like this. I may not like the people that don't like me, but we're all in this together on some level, whether we realize it or not. And it does us well to treat each other with as much respect as we know how. So, what is conjuration? And without getting into the rights and wrongs of how to do it, and the specifics of how each individual, uses their paradigm in it. Conjuration is what I call an abridged version of evocation, in which you are looking to bring a being into this realm on some level, or rather make a connection with a being in the other realms, and anchor that in this realm to a person, a place, or a thing. That is a very simple explanation of it. Technically, in old school methods, evocation and conjuration weren't broke up because you evoked something and often then conjured it, as with Solomon and the vessel, linking it to an object so that you could call it forth later if need be. And a lot of people still do that to this day, and I don't see anything wrong with it, but I'm going to get into modern conjuration and how that differs. Modern conjuration, instead of evoking a being for the specific task, you're evoking it in such a way that it should be resonant with the person you're either evoking it for or for yourself. So you're seeking beings that are explicitly willing and overly joyous to be brought forth for the connection. This is very, very important because there is a big difference between willing and able and powerful. And evocation methods that use classic references such as the 72 Goetic or Enochian High Magic or anything from the voodoo, hoodoo, anything where you're using gods or goddesses, immortals, as they call them. Anything like that, you're dealing with a being that is specifically skilled in certain areas, that has information already written about it, and this is what I call a named being. And that's long-term evocation. And a lot of spirits that are conjured under the conjuration heading are suited for evocation. In fact, I think almost any spirit can be used within evocation. I believe that evocation strengthens the work of conjuration, that it actually empowers, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. But one of the biggest differences between conjuration in the modern world and evocation is that a lot of conjuration is focused on a being that is compatible with another person, as a friendly entity, as something that they would keep around and talk to, and have influenced their mundane world on an emotional, psychological, and energetic feel. And that's great. I think that's fantastic. It's a wonderful thing, but it's not evocation per se, in the sense that in traditional evocation concepts, you are asking this being to accomplish X, Y, or Z. And a lot of beings are brought forth to accomplish X, Y, and Z. And that does fall under the evocation areas of conjuration, but a lot of times what people are really looking for is a companion spirit, a familiar, which is also covered in the Solomonic keys, the lesser key, where it explains that some beings grant better familiars. And really a good way of going about getting familiar spirits. But I digress a little bit on that. I think I've kind of wandered off topic a little. The concept here is that with Conjuration, you're focusing on resonance and compatibility more than anything else. And then the ability to accomplish a task becomes secondary because this being is going to have its energy linked to this realm. Even though they exist in multiple places, multiple times, even though they have a vast area of focus they may be putting out there into the world, and the worlds, I should say. And I believe they exist on multiple planes, multiple dimensions. I believe even the concept of a living being, what would be known as an entity rather than a spirit in modern terminology, where an entity is one that has its own physical home place, such as Thor or Odin, which are immortal entities, or a spirit, which is one that really no longer has a body, and it's believed that they've passed on. I believe that discernment, that division is artificial because too many things fall into the mid-grade of, kind of here and kind of there, and I think these things are vaster than we recognize, and as a result, they exist in many, many planes at one time. That's why they can be here when we call for them, and yet be there doing what they do. Another example, that would be like the higher self of us. I have myself issued warrant to my higher self at different points to come upon command to certain people that need me. I used to do it for anyone who needed me, and now I've limited that to friends that I've specifically said, yes, you may call upon this. And lo and behold, they would have trouble in a dream or something, and I would show up. They would say, you showed up with a warhammer in hand and smited my foe. I'm like, I did? Good. Did I win? Yes, good. Because my higher self moves without my own complete awareness, because I am the physical manifestation of Charles within this realm, not Charles within all realms. And when I project my awareness in other realms, I take up the space of that container within that realm. That's my view on it, and that's my view of the Conjuration in beings versus spirits. And I think that we really are trying to find terminology for things we don't have terminology for. And I think it's good because we need to, so that we can understand and work with this method better. But we always need to recognize that we are using a very human, limited mind frame to comprehend a much vaster understanding of things beyond anything that we really can truly put down on paper. So the difference then between long-term conjuration and immediate evocation, you're not binding the being for any period of time because it doesn't necessarily want to be. This would be situations like the goetic spirits, and you can create a link that can be called upon, such as a ring or an item or even a soul link, but it doesn't mean that their presence stays there so that their awareness. So in other words, as they're projecting into this world in many places at many times, they are not always projecting into this place, into this time. Otherwise, you would be dealing with that energy in this place, in this time, all of the time. It would be very overwhelming, especially for these stronger beings, to do that as a form of evocation preliminary in the Conjuration. So with that, for long-term evocation versus short-term evocations are named beings that we call for when needed, and otherwise we don't expect their energy to be around, and that's a different type of binding or bonding, versus long-term conjuration where we expect them to be around. A good example of this from my own personal group, because I have 4 or 5 that I keep on hand. I say 4 or 5 because I've got one who was supposed to go up in the shop a while back, but he's kind of stuck around. I don't know. Him and I get along, and I don't know. I don't want to list him yet. I'm not really ready to let go. But with that, we have Golden Golem, which I've sent out to a couple different clients and potential clients and friends and family and such as needed. And he's a very powerful being that was long-term conjuration. He actually came to me. And that's a good example of a familiar spirit that is a long-term conjuration. He's suitable for evocation. He's powerful and he can accomplish certain tasks. And again, I think all conjurers can, but I think sometimes we're asking things of a conjure that's not in its realm, and we need to be aware of that, especially with so many different conjurers being out there and so many different conjurers being out there. there needs to be an awareness of that concept of, are you looking for the best match for the client? Are you looking for the best match for the person being conjured for, so that you have the best resonance, the best working together? Or are you looking for the most powerful to achieve a goal? Because they're not always the same. It's kind of like having the best employee in a job, in a work site. He may be the best in the sense of getting along with everyone else, but he may not be the best worker for getting the job done. And there's a difference, and you've got to value what you need on a team or a group, or in your own keep if you're a spirit keeper, which I'm going to get more into spirit keeping as we go on here. Looking for something for long-term evocation work means you're looking for something that both has resonance. That means it makes a good conjure, but it also has a lot more power to it for manifestation, which means that it should be a little bit overwhelming for the conjurer or for the evoker when they first start. And a lot of times I have to suggest to people that they ask their beings to lessen their energy output so that they can feel them. And that sounds really funny, but when you're operating at a much higher level, your presence might not be felt. It's not a matter of vibration, it's a matter of overload. So why the division in the terminology? If conjuration used to be evocation, and evocation used to be conjuration, then what the hell happened? Well, what happened was people realized that they could make these bonds over a longer term, and communities sprang up, and the term conjuration took on a different meaning. It's an evolution of terms. Just as I said, evocation and invocation have taken on different meanings for me and for those that I associate with, and for many others that I know, so too has conjuration taken on a different term than evocation. And ultimately, a lot of times, conjuration refers to only a being that has stepped forth willingly to be brought into a connection point with this place, a binding, if you will. I prefer the term bonding, because the term binding has another meaning as well. It generally means to restrain. And if a lot of these beings, if you restrained them and anchored them here and nowhere else, that they didn't exist within the other realms, they would fight. And I wouldn't blame them. They're a multidimensional being. Locking them into a single point would be torture. And that's not what we do. And that's one of the misconceptions that I want to get into starting out. Evocation is not necessarily conjuration in the modern term. You don't always evoke something that you would keep on hand all the time, because they're suited for a task and they love to do the tasks. The 72 Goetic are, in my mind, prime examples, but everyone has different methods. I don't want to step on anyone's toes who says, well, I prefer to bind them for people. That's great. You're creating a two-way communication zone that the person couldn't normally create themselves, and you're creating a link between this world and that world that they wouldn't normally be able to make themselves. And I think that's fantastic. I personally don't keep them on hand on a single vessel because their energies are disruptive for my life in the aspect that I view of them. And this is where we get into aspects of beings. I think every being has multiple aspects as to how it presents itself, just as I am different when I'm out in public than I am on video to some degree than I am at home, while I am still the core Charles, the same man that you know. And this is a really bad example because I am very blunt in who I am generally wherever I go. But, there's difference between private company, people that I know well enough to know what jokes that they enjoy, that I would venture into territory that I might not do on a public video. That's a good example. That's a good example of the two faces of Charles, right? I got a different sense of humor sometimes. Evocation is not torturing a being, even though you must have force of will, because sometimes they won't respect it if you don't. If you aren't willing to walk in with a sword in hand, a lot of beings don't have anything for you. Charles, that's mean and that's evil. How dare you say that, especially like with the Goetic demons. We all know that they're nice, fluffy, happy bunnies. No, they're not. Some are nicer than they are presented, and it depends on how you resonate with them. Some I get along great with, some not so much. And as a sorcerer, I've got to call upon even the ones that I don't get along with as well, and they only respect me if I come in with a sword in hand. For the same purposes, I only respect them when they come in with a sword in hand too. How can I make a statement like that? Oh man, I'm going to get some flack for this. The hate mail is going to flow. Because I make the same statement about my gods. Odin does not appreciate it if I come to him unarmed in a bloat. I always have to have a weapon in one hand, or I have to take and do that number to represent my fist as my weapon, and, come to him and say, I am armed, because that is the nature of that god. If you show up to talk to Odin unarmed, you can do it, and a lot of people do, and I'm not saying anything against it, but my experience, for me, it doesn't work out as well. Maybe that's the aspect of Odin that I'm calling on, because we've talked about aspects a lot as it concerns beings. Aggressive evocation versus passive and gentle methods. An aggressive evocation means you come in armed, and I really think that when you're evoking something in that way, you're evoking the aspect of it that is torturous, that enjoys torture, that respects pain and suffering because it is a force of change. And I think when you come with the passive, you're evoking an aspect. Again, I don't think we ever get the full, true form of any being, because if you did, it would blow through your wall and leave. Conjuration and spirit keeping are not the binding of a spirit from the sense of the classical witchcraft term of binding, or even some forms of ceremonial high magic, the Wiccan form of binding, where you restrain it and hold it still in one spot. No! The only thing you'd get with that is a pissed off being, a being that was ready to kick your ass for what you just did, and I don't blame it. What other response is that for being tied up and forced to stay somewhere? That's not what conjuration is. That's not what spirit keeping is. This is about creating a communications link, a bond, a resonance point, where they may project through and you may communicate to them through. It's not a binding. And if anyone were to ask me, could you bind this spirit in the sense of chaining it to one location in that way? I would tell them no. I would tell them, I'm sorry. If they paid me, I'd refund them. I'd say, I'm sorry, you don't understand what my services are. Here's your money back. That's not my problem now. So that gives you an idea of the misconceptions. And a lot of this will be going out to the spirit keeping community, this video. A lot of it will be going out to other pagan communities. For the spirit keepers out there, a lot of people in the pagan community really believe that we are tying spirits down and forcing them into subjugation. And it is necessary to have videos like this and to have our leaders in this community really reach out and explain what it is we're not doing. We're dealing with either pulling forth familiar spirits that want to work for someone. And I don't really want to say work for them, work with. To commune with would be the proper term. They want to do things for the person because they feel a connection to them. They feel that there's something there. That's a familiar spirit. And really, that's where the term spirit keeping comes from, I think, is from the term familiar spirits. I think the evolution of the term conjuration comes from the fact that a lot of the methods were more about creating a link to the familiar spirit, and then that was it. And I'm going to get into evocation and spirit keeping, why right now it looks like, because I have my little list here on the side of my screen to help me keep on track. Evocation and spirit keeping is the act of empowering and strengthening that connection on your side as the person doing the work, as the person asking for the aid, as the spirit keeper. No conjurer, no evocationist, well, they can do the evocation for you, but no conjurer can make it so that you don't need to do something to work with the being. That working with the being may be, for some, as simple as asking them to do something and letting it go. Some people have that level of connection, that psychic energy. But for those that don't, this is where we get into something that I hope will be a little bit useful. I've done lessons on this in the past, and I keep directing people back to my page, the Rosequartz Labyrinth, where we have lessons wrote up, evocation for spirit keepers. But I feel that maybe video will help me get my points across a lot better in this too, and maybe this will aid people who are still in a little bit of trouble with it. So, what can you expect of spirits with and without evocation and empowering? Without it, it depends on the level of energy of the spirit, its specialties and its goals, as well as how hard it is to perform the task and how much natural energy you're outputting in your link to it, because you are its link to the physical world on some level. Even when you have a vessel, you're still connecting it to the physical world by your actions. for those that don't understand this, when you pass away, unless you are passing the spirit down to someone else, it's going to leave. It will break that bond or that bind to that object. It's not going to stay there forever. It's not going to sit there and do nothing. It might leave the link there, but it's not going to actively monitor it or work through it. It would actually take another evocationist to recognize the subtle hint of the link in that item to work with that being again through that vessel. That's just how it works. They're not going to stick around. So when you pass on from this life, if it's vessel bound, they're going to go in that road. And if it's spirit or soul bound, which I'm not going to get into the differences there because I have my own views on it and they're not popular. But if it's spirit or soul bound, it will still have that link to you because that's more like connecting people together. The other side of that, if you're mean, rude, cruel, and malicious to it, it's going to leave. It's going to break that bind on its own because it's going to have incentive to sit there and chip away with it with a hammer and a chisel until it can. And it doesn't matter who did the binding, me or anyone else. It will eventually break it if you're there being cruel, malicious, and torturous. So I don't know anyone who's ever done that. I've never had anyone do that and come to me and be like, what do I do? You know, I tortured my being and now it's angry at me. I'd be like, ha, good. But, you know, that's something to keep in mind too. That at that point you're creating a bond of friendship that is two-way. That's why I prefer the word bond over bind, because you're creating a bond that is working in both ways. The conjurer is only facilitating the initial step of that, and you're strengthening it over time. Without evocation or empowering, if your bond is very strong, you're a very strong psychic energy resonance, and you're living in this world, you're going to get some manifestation upon request, assuming that you take the moment to truly request. And it's not just an errant random thought. I mean, seriously, put a little bit of intent into this. Let them know that this isn't just, you know, a random wish, because you randomly wish for things all the time. I mean, how many times have I wished for my hair back? But I'm not sitting there being like, you know, Golden Golem, could you please help me with hair growth? I would love to have a full head of hair again. That would actually be beyond its power, because that's influencing things beyond probability, which is the next thing. They manipulate probabilities that are in motion. Okay? They cannot make your bank account jump $500,000 instantly without any other source, but they can get you more time at work, possibly, or help you get that promotion, or help you find a better job, or encourage you to find a better job. So that is, you know, it's all about affecting probability. Same with all magic. I've said this how many times on the Labyrinth. This is a Labyrinth episode, and I'm talking about probability manipulation again. Who could have guessed? But that's what they do. And in terms of spiritual defense and protection, they will go toe-to-toe as best they are able against other beings. And not all beings are fighters, and not all beings want to be fighters. So recognize that, and beyond that, also recognize that for every method of spiritual combat, there's a way around it. And I once expressed to a good friend of mine that spiritual combat is a lot more, especially magical combat, between two sorcerers or two wizards, if you will, is more like two people launching missiles, okay, back and forth, than it is like a true war, because spells and curses like that move like that, and they can't necessarily intervene directly. And it depends on the being, and it depends on your link to them and their link to you. There are too many factors in this, and sometimes you got to meet them halfway. In fact, most of the time you got to meet them halfway. So without that, their impact, if you're a natural, is great, fantastic. But if you're not, you need to do something to help with that. And that's where we get into degrees of evocation, degrees of it. Okay? There are, as I've got listed on my little list here of keep me on track, please, documentation, 4 degrees of evocation. The first one is offerings. It's the smallest degree. You offer a candle. You offer incense. You provide something to act as a physical, energetic link between here and there. Right? You know, here and there. Back and forth. And that is a powerful thing in and of itself, because you are putting some mental attention. Now, offerings need to be done with reverence, focus, and some level of intensity. 15 minutes to prepare the candle is not unheard of. 15 minutes to meditate and try to instill some concept into the incense of bringing forth this being is not unheard of. A little bit of hard work will get you a long way. If you are lighting a candle and setting it down, being like, I lit a candle, then you need to watch more Labyrinth episodes. You do. You need to go back through my entire collection, and I'm going to leave it at that. Minor rituals are kind of like offerings usually. They have a little bit more to it. You may write a small poem. You may do a lesser banishing ritual first to clear out any influences that are slowing you down. You might do a bit of a dedication rite. You might offer an offering with a little bit more meaning to it. You may sit in meditation a bit longer. Generally, minor rituals are more poem-based in my experience, and more symbol-based, and they take a little bit longer. If the shortest time you could expect to put into an offering is 5 minutes, the shortest time you can expect to put into a minor ritual is 15 to 20. That's a lot of time out of the day. People don't realize. It's something, you're looking at 1/48th of your day. So, something like, 10%? Somewhere around there? Not quite. Yeah, about 10%, I guess. About 5%. So you're looking at maybe 5% of your day put into it to do it right. And I would even suggest upwards of an hour for major rituals. Major rituals have a lot more to it. We're talking involved poems, major symbols, evocation of other powers, opening gates, and specifically focusing on the imagery of opening a gate between here and there to facilitate the strengthening of this connection for what you're asking them to do. That's a major ritual. The highest of these is spirit journeying. That's meeting them on the other side. Because when you meet them on the other side, you're building that bridge in a form of shamanic journey, a form of guided meditation, a form of projection. That's the strongest thing you can do, in my experience. And that may take less time for a lot of people, but it takes a little bit more out of you than ritual will. And a combination of that and major or minor ritual, you can't beat that. That would be the absolute best method for evocation for spirit keepers. That would be the penultimate. If you're doing that, you'll be getting results. But that's the nature of it. If you're not meeting them halfway, they have as much power to influence things as they've had power to influence things. If you're asking a being to do something, and it doesn't, and it wants to, then maybe you need to meet it halfway and bridge that connection a little bit. And this doesn't mean you got to be a full-blown sorcerer, though it helps to learn magic. It really does. Because, as I said at the beginning of this video, we're going to rewind time, okay? At the beginning of this video, as I said, evocation is an advanced form of conjuration, or conjuration is an abridged form of evocation. It is the steps up to evocation without the full evocation. So what you're getting is, instead of finding a being, working with it, learning about it, writing down the information, and then evoking it, that step is being taken care of for you in the sense of building that connection and then being linked to an object to make it easier. You have to carry out the rest of that. That's how you get results. That's how you get your spirits to work with you, or for you in some instances, if they're the kind that prefer to be in servitude. And that sounds funny, but you know what? Some people are workaholics, and some spirits are workaholics. Good example, Golden Golem. Every time something comes up that needs done, that is not, an order that I'm filling myself, I get this little nudge, and he's like, hey, I could handle that Reiki thing over there. Yeah, you could handle that Reiki. Actually, he kind of sits over on my altar off to my right, which I know you can't see, and I have no way of adjusting the camera easily because it's sitting on top of my monitor. But he sits there, that's why I look over in that way. And I'll get this feeling like a poke on the back of my right side. Like, hey, I could go handle that Reiki for you. Oh, yeah, you could. Are you saying that you're bored? Yes. Got it. Okay, so that's a thing. That's a being that loves to work. Okay? That's great. And beings like that are going to tend to go out and do more without full-on evocation. But you notice I keep him on my altar, where he gets a continual supply of raw energy and focus when I do other rituals, when I do dedications. He gets a little bit of that. He gets a little bit of oomph. What it boils down to is evocation is building the bridge from here to there and back again. And that is how you get those results. That's what you got to do to get things to work for you. And if you're just telling it, well, I need you to do this, and all you're doing is lighting a candle, and you're not putting any time to meditate on that candle, to focus energy and intensity into that candle, then it's a candle. And they're going to try their hardest because they know that you're doing what you can, even though you don't realize what you need to do to build the rest of that bridge. Don't get me wrong, okay? If it's a matter of getting effort out of a spirit that's been conjured, you will triple their effort by lighting a candle if that's all you know how to do. But when you go the extra step of empowering it, of doing a little bit of work with it, sitting there meditating on it for a few minutes and trying to instill some of your physical energy that links you to this world so that they can bridge the gap, that's going to give them something to work with. It's not that they're not going to try hard when you don't. They recognize that you're doing what you can do, but they're doing what they can do too. And if spirits could manifest major physical changes in reality, such as pick people up and body slam them so easily, I would have a lot more orders for a shamanic journey to get rid of the ones that have done things like that or something similar enough. That's for sure. But we would live in a much different world. We wouldn't have the technologies that we do. We wouldn't have the sciences that we do because we wouldn't have needed them. We would have went in a different direction. They alter probabilities. They alter things in motion. If you have something that's not in motion at all, they can alter probabilities to try to bring it into motion by bringing other things that are in motion. If you have a job that you're not happy in and you need more money and a promotion is just going to make it worse for you, hey, I was there at one point in my life, then they're going to have to go another road. They're going to have to go a road that maybe gets you to change your life entirely. Maybe move to another state. Like, I don't know what that's like, right? But they're going to have to do it through means that influence probability. And if your only line of improvement is to improve yourself in something you don't enjoy doing, they're not going to move you there because they're going to be like, well, you asked for me to help you get more money, but you wanted to be happy in what you do. But you're shoveling crap at the manure factory, and you don't like it. We've had that discussion. So I need you to like it less. So maybe what they'll do is influence you at that point and affect you to want to make that change. So suddenly you hate your job more than anything. So now you're there in the want ads in the classified section and you find this one that you're like, I don't know, that looks interesting. I don't know, by now you're depressed, so everything looks bad. And then you get that feeling like you need to go in that direction. So you're like, something's nudging me there. So then you go and you get employed there. Maybe it's not much better than shoveling crap at the manure factory. But a week there, and your boss, because even, you have the worst attitude ever because you don't enjoy the job, but your boss loves you. He's like, you have a great attitude, son. Come on. You know what? You're going to be management one day. And you're like, I am? Okay. That works. And the next thing you know, you have a better attitude about it, and your life is progressing in a different direction. That's how they work. They move pieces that can be moved. If you don't have an inlet, then there's not much that they can do. For healing, our bodies are always in motion, so they do what they can by affecting that. Not a doctor's advice, not medical advice in any sense of the word, but your body's always in motion. Cells are always living and dying and reproducing. So healing is actually easier in some ways until an injury has set in a way that it can't be healed because there's no more cell division in a way that allows it to be overcome. Good example, shattered pinky that didn't heal right. I was sword fighting, I did healing on it, but I did healing with it not set properly because I didn't realize it was broken. I thought I had sprained tendons in it because that's how high my pain threshold really is. Yeah, shattered bones, yeah, sprained tendon. But seriously, all of that healing energy work, what did it do? It fused the bone together, and then it fused it in a way so that I could still grip because I was intent to be able to fight again. And I can, when I choose to. That's an example of healing in motion. It accelerated a healing process in a way that I didn't expect it. But it worked, sort of. because I didn't have full understanding of what I was focusing and doing. That wasn't calling on a spirit to do it, but it would work the same way if I'd called on a spirit, because I was pushing in a direction. If you take anything from this, you get the best results with your spirits if you're a spirit keeper by working with them. Evocation is the act of building bridges between you and the being you're working with. Spirit keeping and conjuration are different from evocation, and they are way different from binding. I am so tired of people saying, hey, trap spirits, makes them do shit. No, I do that to people. No, I'm kidding. But realistically, I would no more enslave a spirit or an entity or a being or whatever you want to call it than I would a person. In fact, one of my most respected colleagues, a guy who goes by the name Dark Lord Midnight, also known as Kellis, for those who know him by that name, one of my most revered and esteemed colleagues, makes it a point that his servitors that are life quality, the alphas, the ones that are like a living being, have free will to leave if they are harmed or tortured or put to pain for no good reason. Wow. Okay? Even the highest level servitor, which is as close to life as a created entity as I've ever seen, has free will and won't stand there and let you beat on it. So no, we don't bind spirits in the Wiccan sense of binding, and it needs to be cleared up. Because you know what? There's a huge difference between facilitating a method that can be used for evocation or for companionship as a familiar spirit and binding a being. Because binding in that sense of the word is cruel. And it's just not my thing. If someone out there is a spirit conjurer, they're someone within that community, and they do bind, I would love for them to do a video and explain to me their reasoning and their methods. I won't agree with them, and I'll love to hit back on that in the back and forth as the right and wrong of it. But as a practicing sorcerer and shaman, I don't see any value in enslaving anything, because slaves don't work as hard as they can or do their best, and they never have your best interest in heart. I would rather have 4 or 5 beings, and that's what I have, who I know and trust to get the job done, than one that was enslaved and was like, you're gonna do what I tell you to. So that kind of covers it, I guess. This has been more of an informative video, my way of reaching out to the spirit keeping community, because frankly, without you guys, I wouldn't be here. You know, you have given me such support and helped me so much in building my business and building my own skills and giving me ideas. I mean, I get emails with people like, hey, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? Have you tried this? Well, you know, this isn't that clear. Could you explain it a bit better? You know, and an opportunity to help people, which really is what I started the Labyrinth for, and it's really why I started this business. And I want to thank you. I guess this is my thank you. This is my big thank you to that group. So there it is. This has been the Labyrinth, and I'm hoping that this helped awaken that mystic night within.